An orphaned boy shields a millionaire's wife from gunshots, but the next day, armored vehicles mysteriously arrive at his foster home. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Jamal Washington instinctively ducked when he heard the gunshots, his thin 12-year-old body shielding the unknown woman who had fallen beside him on the sidewalk. The shots continued to echo down the street as Jamal kept the woman pressed against the side of a parked sedan, his oversized brown jacket, 3 sizes too big, now dirty with gutter mud. The woman in the beige coat and caramel-colored hat trembled beneath his small frame, her wide blue eyes reflecting the same terror he had seen in the mirror countless times in foster homes. Here he was, a kid from Chicago's South Side who should have been just walking home from school, now caught in the middle of yet another gang shootout that wasn't his. "Stay down," Jamal murmured, his voice assuming a calmness he didn't feel. His eyes scanned the street, identifying the safest path to get them out of there. "When I count to 3, we're going to run to that convenience store." The woman nodded, her delicate fingers clutching Jamal's worn sleeve. He took a deep breath and counted, his worn sneakers springing against the concrete as he pulled the elegant woman through the rain of bullets. The gunfire abruptly ceased when they disappeared through the door of the store, where a clerk was already crouching behind the counter, phone in hand. "Catherine! Oh my God, Catherine!" A man in a suit came running into the store minutes later, followed by 2 burly security guards with earpieces. "He saved me," the woman, Catherine, said, pointing to Jamal, who was sitting on a stool, drinking a soda offered by the clerk. "This brave boy protected me with his own body." The man turned to Jamal, extending his hand. "Thomas Reynolds, you risked your life for my wife." Jamal hesitated before shaking the man's hand, noticing the watch that probably cost more than everything he had ever owned. Sirens approached as one of the security guards whispered something in Thomas's ear, while police questioned witnesses outside. Mrs. Glover, Jamal's foster mother, burst through the door. "Jamal Washington, what have you done this time?" she yelled, completely ignoring the Reynolds and the security guards. "The school called because you didn't show up for your detention, and now I find you with the police." She grabbed Jamal's arm, her fingers leaving marks on his dark skin. "Ma'am," Thomas Reynolds stepped between them, his voice calm but authoritative. "Your son is a hero. He saved my wife from being shot." Mrs. Glover looked him up and down, her expression instantly changing as she recognized the famous tech billionaire. A police officer confirmed Jamal's story after reviewing the store's security footage. For the first time since losing his parents 3 years ago, someone was looking at him with genuine admiration. Catherine Reynolds insisted on getting his contact information, embracing him with tears in her eyes. "You are extraordinary, Jamal," she said, holding his face between her hands. When he finally left with the reluctant Mrs. Glover, Jamal carried with him not just Thomas Reynolds' business card, but also the first feeling of pride he had felt in years. Back at the Glovers' crowded foster home, Jamal lay on his thin mattress long after his roommates had fallen asleep. The moonlight filtered through the cracked window, illuminating Thomas Reynolds' card in his hands. The embossed letters felt smooth under his fingertips, a tangible reminder that someone had seen value in him today. Someone had called him extraordinary instead of troublemaker, delinquent, or burden. "Hey," whispered Marcus from the neighboring bed, the only person in the house Jamal considered a friend. "What's that?" Jamal quickly tucked the card under his pillow. "Nothing. Go back to sleep." "Come on, Jay. I saw the news at Mrs. Wilson's place next door. You're famous now." Jamal sighed. "I just did what anyone would do." Marcus snorted. "No, they wouldn't. Most people would have run away." He propped himself up on one elbow. "That was Thomas Reynolds, man. The Thomas Reynolds. He builds rocket ships and has a private island." "He doesn't build rocket ships," Jamal corrected, though he wasn't entirely sure. "Well, he's rich enough to buy one," Marcus insisted. "You think he'll give you a reward?" Jamal shook his head. "I don't need a reward." But secretly, as he drifted off to sleep, he wondered what it would be like to matter to someone like Thomas Reynolds, someone who could change lives with the stroke of a pen, someone whose world was as far from the South Side as the moon from Earth. The next morning, Jamal was awakened by the sound of powerful engines. Running to the cracked window of the room he shared with 3 other boys, his eyes widened at the sight of 3 armored vehicles stopping in front of the dilapidated foster home. A murmur of panic spread through the house as children crowded around the windows. "What did you do, boy?" Mr. Glover shouted, marching toward him with a belt already in his hand. The large man's face was contorted with rage, a familiar sight that made Jamal's stomach tighten. Before Jamal could answer, the doorbell rang, its shrill sound cutting through the tense atmosphere of the house. Mr. Glover hesitated, the belt still gripped tightly in his fist. "Don't you move," he hissed at Jamal before stomping toward the front door. From the top of the stairs, Jamal watched as Mr. Glover opened the door, revealing Thomas Reynolds standing on the worn welcome mat, flanked by security personnel. The contrast was jarring, Thomas's immaculate navy suit against the backdrop of the neglected porch, his polished shoes a stark contrast to the scuffed linoleum in the entryway. "I'm looking for Jamal Washington," Thomas announced, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent house. Mr. Glover's demeanor transformed instantly. The belt disappeared behind his back, and his scowl morphed into an ingratiating smile. "Of course, Mr. Reynolds. What an honor to have you in our humble home. Jamal is just upstairs. May I ask what this is about?" Thomas's eyes moved past Mr. Glover, scanning the cluttered entryway with its peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceiling. His gaze continued up the stairs until it locked with Jamal's. For a moment, they looked at each other across the social chasm that separated them, the billionaire entrepreneur and the foster kid from the South Side. "I'd like to speak with him," Thomas said, never breaking eye contact with Jamal. "Privately." By now, every child in the house was watching the scene unfold, their faces pressed against banisters and door frames. Marcus gave Jamal a small nod of encouragement from the bedroom doorway. Taking a deep breath, Jamal descended the stairs, acutely aware of his worn pajama pants and faded t-shirt. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, Mrs. Glover emerged from the kitchen, hastily wiping her hands on a dishcloth. "Mr. Reynolds, what a surprise. We were just about to have breakfast. Would you care to join us?" Her voice was pitched unnaturally high, her smile too wide to be genuine. "That won't be necessary," Thomas replied politely but firmly. "Is there somewhere Mr. Washington and I can speak privately?" Of course," Mr. Glover interjected, shooting a warning glance at Jamal. "You can use my office. Right this way." He led them toward a small room off the living area that was grandly referred to as his office, though it mainly served as storage for unopened mail and half-empty liquor bottles. As they walked, Thomas placed a gentle hand on Jamal's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but the warmth and steadiness of it made Jamal stand a little taller. He noticed Mrs. Glover's eyes, following the movement, a calculating look crossing her face. Mr. Glover hurriedly cleared some papers from a chipped desk and pulled out a chair. "Make yourself comfortable, Mr. Reynolds. Can I get you some coffee? Water?" "No, thank you," Thomas said, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. "We would appreciate some privacy now." Mr. Glover nodded too many times, backing out of the room. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be right outside if you need anything." As the door closed behind Mr. Glover, the room fell silent except for the ticking of a cheap wall clock. Thomas remained standing, studying Jamal with an intensity that made the boy want to squirm. "Do you know who I am, Jamal?" Thomas finally asked. Jamal nodded. "You're Thomas Reynolds. You own Reynolds Enterprises. You make computers and stuff." A small smile flickered across Thomas's face. "And stuff, yes." He gestured to a chair. "Please, sit down." Jamal perched on the edge of the seat, his bare feet not quite touching the floor. His heart was hammering in his chest. Was he in trouble? Had he done something wrong? Maybe the woman, Catherine, had accused him of something after he left. "I want to thank you again for what you did yesterday," Thomas said, his voice softening. "Catherine means everything to me. If you hadn't been there..." He trailed off, emotion briefly crossing his face before he regained his composure. "I just did what anyone would do," Jamal mumbled, repeating what he'd told Marcus the night before. "No," Thomas said firmly. "You didn't. That's the point, Jamal. What you did was extraordinary. You put yourself in danger to protect a complete stranger. That kind of courage and selflessness is rare, especially in someone so young." Jamal didn't know how to respond to the praise. Outside the office, he could hear whispers and shuffling as the other foster kids tried to eavesdrop. Through the thin walls, he caught fragments of Mrs. Glover's voice on the phone, something about opportunities and compensation. Thomas seemed to notice Jamal's discomfort. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I want to help you, Jamal, and I think I'm in a position to do that in a significant way." As Thomas began to explain why he had really come, Jamal felt as if the floor might disappear beneath him. The word adoption hung in the air like an impossible dream, too fragile to grasp, too precious to believe. Through the partially open blinds, Jamal could see the other foster children gathering in the hallway, their faces a mixture of curiosity and envy. Among them stood Marcus, his expression different from the others, a resigned sadness that Jamal understood immediately. If he left, he would be leaving the only real friend he had made in this place. As Thomas continued speaking, his voice became background noise to the storm of emotions inside Jamal. Part of him wanted to run, to grab this chance at a different life with both hands. Another part felt rooted to the spot, afraid that if he moved, the mirage would dissolve, leaving him in the same hopeless reality. "I came to talk with Jamal Washington," Thomas announced, his steady eyes finding those of the frightened boy. "In private." In the small office with peeling wallpaper and musty smell, Thomas Reynolds revealed his proposition without preamble. "Catherine and I want to adopt you, Jamal." The words hung in the air like strange birds, too exotic to belong in this run-down foster home. Jamal felt the floor vanish beneath his feet. His mind struggled to process what he'd just heard, wondering if this was some elaborate joke or dream. Rich people like the Reynolds didn't just appear out of nowhere to adopt kids from the South Side. That's not possible," Mr. Glover interrupted, his obsequious smile suddenly strained. His eyes darted between Thomas and Jamal, fingers fidgeting nervously with his belt loop. "The system doesn't allow adoptions to happen so quickly, especially with differences." His gaze flickered meaningfully between Jamal's dark skin and Thomas's pale complexion. Thomas turned toward Mr. Glover with a frigid smile that never reached his eyes. "I employ 12 attorneys and know the governor personally." His voice was soft but carried an undercurrent of steel. "The paperwork is already being expedited as we speak." Jamal remained silent, feeling as though he'd been dropped into someone else's life. Through the half-open door, he glimpsed Mrs. Glover pacing in the hallway, phone pressed against her ear, gesticulating wildly. Her hushed voice carried fragments. "Substantial compensation, special circumstances, immediate placement fee." The other foster children had gathered at a safe distance, watching the drama unfold. Their expressions ranged from open envy to suspicion, as if Jamal had somehow engineered this miracle through trickery. Only Marcus stood apart, leaning against the wall with his thin arms crossed, a resigned sadness in his eyes that pierced Jamal's heart more effectively than Mr. Glover's belt ever could. "I'll need to make some calls," Mr. Glover said, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "There are procedures, forms, all being handled." Thomas cut him off politely but firmly. "A representative from Child Protective Services will be arriving shortly with the emergency placement papers. Given the nature of Jamal's current living situation, Judge Hathaway felt expedited proceedings were warranted." Mr. Glover's face flushed dark red. "What exactly are you implying about my home, Mr. Reynolds?" Before Thomas could respond, Mrs. Glover burst into the room, her entire demeanor transformed into one of maternal concern. "Jamal needs to pack his things," she announced, as if she'd been planning his departure for weeks. "I'll help him get ready." She placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder that felt nothing like Thomas's gentle touch from earlier. This was possessive. Warning! Outside the foster home, a sleek black town car had joined the armored vehicles. Through the window, Jamal could see a woman in a smart gray suit emerging, carrying a leather portfolio. The CPS representative, no doubt, arriving far more quickly than the system had ever moved for him before. "I'll speak with the representative," Thomas said, standing. "Jamal, take your time gathering your belongings. We're not in a rush." As Thomas left the room, Jamal finally found his voice. "What about Marcus?" Thomas paused at the doorway. "Marcus? My friend. I can't leave him here." The words tumbled out before Jamal could stop them. "He's the only real family I have." Thomas studied him thoughtfully, but was interrupted by Mrs. Glover's nervous laughter. "Don't be ridiculous, Jamal. You should be grateful Mr. Reynolds is interested in you. Now go pack before you ruin this opportunity." Upstairs in the cramped bedroom, Marcus helped Jamal stuff his meager possessions into a frayed backpack. Neither boy spoke for several minutes, the silence heavy with unspoken words. "You have to go," Marcus finally said, handing Jamal a worn t-shirt. "This is your chance, Jay." Jamal shook his head, tears threatening. "I won't leave you with them. You know what he's like when he drinks." "I've survived this long." Marcus shrugged, but the bruise peeking from beneath his sleeve told a different story. When Jamal descended the stairs with his backpack, Catherine Reynolds was waiting by the armored SUV. Her face brightened when she saw him, but Jamal couldn't return her smile. He approached her slowly, aware of the entire household watching from windows and doorways. "I can't go," he said quietly but firmly. "Marcus is my only real family. I can't leave him here." Catherine observed the thin boy standing beside Jamal, the two holding hands in silent solidarity. Her eyes softened with understanding as she took in Marcus's faded clothes and the way he slightly favored his left side, as if nursing an injury. "I understand," she said gently. "Thomas and I can look into a solution for Marcus too, but at the moment, social services has only approved you." She knelt to meet Jamal's eyes. "The system moves slowly, Jamal, even when Thomas pushes. But we can start the process for Marcus today." When the social worker finally arrived with the paperwork, Jamal felt suffocated by impossible choices. The woman, Ms. Chen, was unlike any social worker he'd encountered before, efficient, respectful, and clearly familiar with the Reynolds. "These are temporary guardianship papers," she explained, showing Jamal each document. "You're not being permanently adopted today. This gives you time to decide if you want to stay with the Reynolds family." Catherine touched his arm lightly. "I promise you can visit Marcus," she whispered. "And maybe, with time." She left the sentence hanging, a fragile promise in the air. Jamal looked at Marcus, who gave him a small nod. "Go," his friend mouthed silently. With reluctant steps, Jamal walked toward the waiting vehicle, each step feeling like a betrayal. As he slid into the soft leather seat, he looked back at the dilapidated house that had never been a home. Marcus stood on the porch, raising his hand in farewell. Behind him loomed Mr. Glover, one heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder. Jamal felt part of his heart staying behind as the car pulled away, carrying him toward an uncertain future, with strangers who had everything except what he valued most, his only friend. The drive to the Reynolds estate took them from the cramped streets of Southside Chicago to the sprawling mansions of Lake Forest. As the landscape changed from concrete and graffiti to manicured lawns and wrought iron gates, Jamal remained silent, staring out the window at a world he'd only seen in movies. The Reynolds mansion appeared like something from another planet. Vast gardens surrounding a stone structure that could have housed every foster child Jamal had ever met, with rooms to spare. Marble steps led to enormous double doors that opened before they even approached, revealing a uniformed staff member waiting to greet them. "Welcome home, Mrs. Reynolds," the man said with a slight bow. His eyes flickered to Jamal with unconcealed curiosity. "And welcome to you, young sir." Inside, the foyer alone was larger than the Glovers' entire first floor. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, illuminating artwork that Jamal recognized from his school textbooks. Catherine guided him through the house, introducing staff members whose names blurred together. Each room they passed seemed more magnificent than the last, until Jamal felt dizzy with the opulence surrounding him. "This will be your room," Catherine said, opening a door on the second floor. Jamal stepped inside and froze. The bedroom was larger than the entire shared room at the Glovers. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, while a desk with a brand-new laptop occupied another. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens with a fountain glittering in the afternoon sun. "The closet has been stocked with clothes we hope will fit," Catherine continued, opening double doors to reveal more clothing than Jamal had ever owned. "If anything doesn't suit you, we can exchange it." On the desk sat a smartphone still in its packaging, next to a tablet and a stack of books. Jamal approached cautiously, afraid to touch anything. "These are for me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Catherine smiled. "Thomas thought you might enjoy the latest technology. The books were my suggestion. I wasn't sure what you liked to read." Jamal noticed titles ranging from science fiction to biographies. One book about computer programming had a bookmark already placed inside. "I'll let you settle in," Catherine said. "Dinner will be at 7, but please explore and make yourself at home. Thomas will join us later. He had to finish some business at the office." After Catherine left, Jamal sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. He pulled his worn backpack onto his lap and began unpacking his few possessions, some clothes, a dog-eared comic book, a smooth stone Marcus had given him for luck. When he reached for the old envelope containing the only photo of his parents, his fingers found empty space. Frantically, he dumped the backpack's contents onto the bed, searching for the precious photo, but it was gone. His most valued possession had somehow disappeared during the move. Later that evening, as he made his way downstairs for dinner, Jamal overheard voices from the kitchen. Instinctively, he slowed his steps and listened. "Can't just transform a boy from the streets into an heir overnight," a woman's voice was saying. "The master has his reasons," replied another voice, male and dignified, the butler who had greeted them earlier. "Mr. Reynolds never wanted children before. Why now? And why this boy?" "It's not our place to question. Mrs. Reynolds seems quite attached already." "I'm just saying it won't be easy. The board of directors will have questions, and the press will be merciless when they find out." Jamal backed away silently, his mind racing. Why had they chosen him? Was it really just gratitude for saving Catherine, or was something else happening? The missing photo of his parents suddenly seemed more significant. At his first formal dinner in the Reynolds household, Jamal sat stiffly in clothes that still had tags removed just hours earlier. The dining table could have seated 20, but places were set for only 3. Servers moved silently around them, delivering courses Jamal couldn't name, and using utensils he'd never seen before. Thomas arrived just as the main course was served, apologizing for his lateness. He asked Jamal about his room, his interests, his education. Normal questions that nonetheless felt like a test Jamal wasn't prepared for. As a server poured water into Jamal's crystal glass, his elbow accidentally knocked against an ornate porcelain vase positioned near his place setting. Time seemed to slow as the vase teetered, then crashed to the floor, shattering with a sound that echoed through the vast dining room. The silence that followed was deafening. Instinctively, Jamal flinched away from the table, his arms rising to protect his head in a defensive posture that revealed years of conditioning. His body curled inward, eyes squeezed shut as he awaited the inevitable blow. Thomas and Catherine exchanged horrified glances across the table. "Jamal," Thomas said gently, slowly rising from his chair. "It's all right, it was just an accident." When Thomas reached to touch Jamal's shoulder, the boy recoiled violently, knocking over his chair as he scrambled backward. Without a word, he bolted from the dining room, footsteps pounding up the stairs until they heard a door slam, followed by the distinct click of a lock engaging. "Perhaps we're being selfish," Thomas murmured, staring at the shattered porcelain. "He needs more than we can offer." Catherine shook her head, determination hardening her delicate features. "He needs time and security. We can give him that." Through the bathroom door, Catherine could hear Jamal's muffled sobs as she sat on the hallway floor, waiting patiently for the storm to pass. The barrier between them was more than wood and metal. It was years of broken trust, of adults who had failed him time and again. She wondered if they would be just two more names on that long list, or if somehow they could break through and reach the extraordinary boy who had risked everything to save a stranger. 3 weeks after the Voss incident, Jamal sat in the elegant office of Dr. Winters, the therapist the Reynolds had hired. The room, with its plush leather chairs and soothing blue walls, was designed to create comfort. But Jamal remained perched on the edge of his seat, as if ready to flee at any moment. He hadn't spoken a word during the first 2 sessions, merely nodding or shaking his head in response to the therapist's gentle questioning. "How are things going at the Reynolds home?" Dr. Winters asked, her voice measured and warm. She was different from the school counselors Jamal had encountered before. She didn't check her watch every 5 minutes or speak to him as if he were much younger than his 12 years. Jamal shrugged, his eyes fixed on the small aquarium in the corner of the room. The colorful fish darting between miniature castle towers seemed to live in a world apart from his concerns. "Thomas mentioned you've been having nightmares," she continued, making a small note on her pad. This caught Jamal's attention. He hadn't told Thomas about the dreams. "How did he know?" Dr. Winters smiled, pleased to have finally elicited a verbal response. "He said he heard you calling out one night when he was working late in his study." Jamal considered this information. The nightmares had indeed returned, vivid recreations of the day his parents died, only now sometimes Catherine or Thomas were in the car too. Sometimes, in the worst versions, Marcus was there as well. Over the past weeks, Thomas and Catherine had been unfailingly patient. After the vase incident, they had removed all expensive decorative items from areas Jamal frequented. Catherine had started joining him for breakfast each morning, maintaining a gentle stream of conversation that required no response from him. Thomas had created a routine of showing Jamal something new in the house each evening. The library with first editions behind glass, the small observatory on the roof, the temperature-controlled wine cellar that had once been a bomb shelter. "They're trying," Jamal finally admitted. "They're not like the other foster parents." "How are they different?" Dr. Winters asked, keeping her expression neutral despite the breakthrough. Jamal's fingers traced the seam of his jeans, new ones that fit perfectly. "They don't yell. They ask what I want to eat. Thomas showed me his collection of meteorites yesterday." A small smile flickered across his face. "He let me hold one that came from Mars." Dr. Winters nodded encouragingly. It sounds like you're starting to feel more comfortable there. The smile vanished as quickly as it had appeared. It won't last. Nothing good ever does. Why do you say that, Jamal? He fell silent again, the weight of his experiences pressing down on him like a physical force. The sessions with Dr. Winters were supposed to help him adjust to his new life, but how could he explain the constant sense of waiting for everything to collapse? How could he describe the fear that gnawed at him every time Thomas or Catherine showed him kindness? The certainty that it would eventually be withdrawn. My parents didn't die in an accident like everyone thinks, Jamal finally whispered, the words escaping before he could catch them. He hadn't planned to say it, hadn't spoken this truth aloud to anyone. Dr. Winters maintained her neutral expression, though her pen paused above her notepad. What happened to them, Jamal? I saw what happened. His voice was barely audible now, his eyes focused on something far beyond the walls of the office. The car that hit ours didn't lose control. It aimed for us. I saw the driver. The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Dr. Winters waited, giving him space to continue or retreat. We were coming home from my baseball game, Jamal continued, the memory unspooling like a film reel in his mind. Dad was driving. Mom was telling him about a paper she was working on. She was a professor at UChicago. I was in the back seat with my trophy. His hands twisted together in his lap. The black car came out of nowhere. Dad tried to swerve, but he swallowed hard. I saw the driver's face before the impact. He wasn't scared or surprised. He looked determined. Did you tell the police this? Dr. Winters asked softly. Jamal shook his head. I tried. The detective said I was in shock, that I was confused because of the trauma. No one believed me. I believe you, Jamal. His head snapped up, searching her face for signs of deception or pity. Finding neither, he continued. Yesterday, when I was looking out the window of my new room, I saw the same man standing across the street watching the house. Dr. Winters couldn't fully conceal her alarm at this revelation. Are you certain it was the same person? Jamal nodded emphatically. I'll never forget his face. It's the last thing I saw before our car flipped. He had this scar. He traced a line from his right eyebrow to his cheekbone. And his eyes were different colors, one brown, one blue. Heterochromia, Dr. Winters murmured. That's quite distinctive. She made a note on her pad. Jamal, I need to discuss this with Thomas and Catherine. If someone who was involved in your parents' death is watching the house, everyone could be in danger. For the first time since entering her office, Jamal looked truly frightened. What if they don't believe me either? They will, Dr. Winters assured him, and we'll figure out what to do next, together. The revelation set off a chain reaction within the Reynolds household. That same afternoon, Thomas summoned his head of security, a former military intelligence officer named Dawson, to his home office. Jamal sat uncomfortably in a leather armchair as he recounted his story once more. Dawson didn't dismiss Jamal's account as imagination or trauma. Instead, he methodically noted every detail the boy could recall about the driver and the vehicle that had killed his parents. I'll need to review the original police report, Dawson said to Thomas, and I'll set up additional surveillance around the perimeter immediately. Thomas nodded grimly. I want the security footage from yesterday, reviewed frame by frame. If this man was watching the house, I want to know who he is. Jamal observed this exchange with growing unease. Adults had never taken his fears seriously before. The swift, efficient response to his revelation was both reassuring and terrifying. If Thomas and Dawson believed him, then the threat was real. By dinner time, the security presence around the estate had doubled. Men in dark suits with earpieces patrolled the grounds, and Dawson had installed additional cameras at all entry points. The atmosphere within the mansion had transformed from luxurious tranquility to tense vigilance. I'm sorry, Jamal said quietly as he pushed his pasta around his plate. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." Catherine reached across the table to cover his hand with hers. "You haven't caused any trouble, Jamal. You've helped us protect our family." The word family hung in the air between them, new and fragile. Thomas cleared his throat. "Starting tomorrow, you'll be accompanied by security to and from school. I know it's not ideal, but it's necessary until we understand what's happening." Jamal's first day at Lakeside Preparatory had already been challenging. A midterm transfer to one of Chicago's most elite private schools had marked him as an oddity before he even arrived. The addition of armed security escorts would only further separate him from his peers. "Can I just stay home?" he asked. "I could study here." Thomas and Catherine exchanged glances. "Education is important, Jamal," Thomas began. "So is staying alive," Jamal countered. A surprised laugh escaped Thomas. "You make a fair point. Let me discuss options with the headmaster. Perhaps a temporary arrangement could be made." The next morning, as promised, an armed security detail accompanied Jamal to Lakeside Prep. The black SUV dropped him at the entrance, where 2 guards flanked him as he walked through the ornate doors. The hallways fell silent as he passed, students whispering behind their hands. "Your father adopted Thomas Reynolds?" a boy in a blazer asked incredulously during lunch, sliding uninvited into the seat across from Jamal. "You must be really special, or he has some hidden agenda." Jamal stabbed at his salad, ignoring the comment. He'd heard variations of it all morning. The most charitable interpretation was that Thomas felt indebted to him for saving Catherine. The less charitable theories involved publicity stunts, tax write-offs, and one particularly creative suggestion that Jamal was actually Thomas's illegitimate son. "What happened to your real parents?" the boy pressed. "They died," Jamal said flatly, standing up with his tray. "And Thomas isn't my father. He's my guardian." As he walked away, he could hear the boy's voice carrying across the cafeteria. "I bet there's something weird going on. Why else would someone like Reynolds take in some random kid from the South Side?" The words echoed in Jamal's mind throughout the afternoon, merging with his own doubts. Why had Thomas Reynolds, a billionaire with unlimited options, chosen to bring a troubled foster kid into his home? The staff's whispered questions now seemed more reasonable. That evening, Jamal noticed Thomas frequently on his phone, speaking in hushed tones and ending calls abruptly when Jamal entered the room. During dinner, Thomas's phone buzzed constantly, and twice he excused himself to take calls in his study. Later, as Jamal prepared for bed, he overheard Thomas and Catherine arguing in low voices down the hall. "We need to tell him everything," Catherine was saying. "He deserves to know." "Not yet," Thomas replied. "It's too dangerous. Let Dawson complete his investigation first." "And what if something happens before then? What if—" They fell silent as Jamal's door creaked, betraying his eavesdropping. He quickly shut it and leaned against the wood, heart pounding. What weren't they telling him? What did they know about his parents? The question swirled in his mind, keeping sleep at bay long into the night. The following day, during a rare moment alone, Thomas invited Jamal to visit the headquarters of Reynolds Enterprises. The opportunity to escape the mansion and see the inner workings of a major technology company momentarily overshadowed Jamal's growing suspicions. In the private elevator, ascending to the penthouse level, Thomas finally spoke about his own past. "I was born in a neighborhood not unlike yours," he revealed, surprising Jamal. "I lost my parents when I was 9. Car accident." Jamal studied Thomas's profile, searching for signs of deception. "What happened after that?" 7 foster homes before I turned 18, Thomas said matter-of-factly. "Some better than others. None of them family." The elevator doors opened to a secure floor that required Thomas's fingerprint and retinal scan for entry. Inside was a space unlike the rest of the corporate headquarters, a personal museum of sorts, containing memories of Thomas's childhood. Faded photographs, school reports, and newspaper clippings about the accident that killed his parents covered one wall. "Catherine and I can't have biological children," Thomas continued, watching Jamal examine a photo of a young boy with familiar, determined eyes. "When you saved Catherine's life, we saw it as a sign. But if you're unhappy with us..." Jamal turned away from the pictures, facing Thomas directly. "Why would someone kill my parents?" he asked, the question that had haunted him for 3 years finally finding voice. Thomas hesitated, then retrieved a file from a hidden safe. "Your father, Eric Washington, worked for me," he said, opening the folder to reveal a company ID with his father's smiling face. "He was a brilliant scientist, developing technology that would be worth billions. I believe he was killed because of it." Jamal stared at the photo of his father in the company ID, his fingers trembling as they traced the familiar face. Eric Washington smiled back at him, the same smile Jamal remembered from baseball games and bedtime stories. A tsunami of emotion washed over him: grief, confusion, and a strange sense of relief at finally having some answers. "What kind of technology?" Jamal asked, his voice steadier than he felt. Thomas closed the file carefully. "A revolutionary encryption system that could protect critical infrastructure from cyber attacks. Your father was brilliant, years ahead of his contemporaries. We were working on the final phase when..." He paused, his expression darkening. "When the accident happened." The revelation left Jamal with more questions than answers, but before he could press further, Thomas glanced at his watch. "We should head back," he said. "Catherine will be waiting." As they left the secure room, Jamal noticed Thomas checking his phone again, his brow furrowing at whatever message he'd received. In the elevator descending to the lobby, Thomas placed a protective hand on Jamal's shoulder. "I've increased security around the estate," he said, "and I've assigned 2 of my best men to watch over you specifically. They'll be discreet. You won't even notice them most of the time." Jamal nodded, the weight of their conversation settling heavily on his shoulders. His parents hadn't died in a random accident. They had been targeted because of his father's work. Work for Thomas Reynolds. The coincidence of ending up in Thomas's home seemed less like fate and more like something deliberately engineered. In the underground parking garage, Thomas's driver held the door of an armored Mercedes open for them. Jamal slid into the plush leather interior, noting the thickness of the windows and the subtle reinforcement around the door frames. As they pulled out onto Michigan Avenue, Thomas's phone rang. He answered it with a terse "Reynolds" and listened intently, his expression gradually hardening. "How did they..." he began, then stopped himself, glancing at Jamal. "We'll discuss details later. Double the perimeter team immediately." He hung up and attempted a reassuring smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just a precaution," he said. The car navigated through downtown Chicago, passing gleaming skyscrapers and luxury boutiques. Jamal found himself scanning the passing vehicles, suddenly hyper-aware of every SUV that lingered too long behind them, every motorcycle that pulled alongside. "Your father had enemies," Thomas said abruptly. "Powerful ones. People who would pay millions to obtain his research before it could be patented and protected." Jamal turned from the window. "Is that why that man was watching your house? He's still looking for my dad's work?" "Possibly," Thomas said. "Or perhaps he's checking whether you might have information." He hesitated. "Jamal, did your father ever give you anything to keep safe? A flash drive, perhaps, or documents?" Jamal thought back to the days before the accident. "No, he was always careful not to bring work home. Mom had a rule about it." Thomas nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. They fell into silence as the car continued north, toward Lake Forest. They were halfway to the Reynolds estate when a black SUV pulled alongside them at a stoplight. Jamal glanced over casually, then felt his blood freeze. Through the tinted window of the other vehicle, he caught a glimpse of mismatched eyes, one brown, one blue, staring directly at him. "Thomas," he whispered, unable to tear his gaze away. "It's him, the driver." Thomas reacted instantly, speaking sharply into the car's communication system. "Defensive Protocol Alpha. Hostile vehicle on our right." The driver responded immediately, pressing a button that Jamal hadn't noticed before. Metal shutters began descending over the windows as the light turned green. Instead of proceeding forward, their driver executed a sharp U-turn, tires squealing against the asphalt. The black SUV immediately gave chase, joined by a second identical vehicle that materialized from a side street. Thomas pulled Jamal down below the window line as their driver accelerated, weaving through traffic with alarming precision. "Stay down!" the driver shouted as the first impact came, the SUV ramming their rear bumper. Despite the armored chassis, the blow sent them lurching forward. Through the remaining gap in the shutters, Jamal saw more vehicles converging. Not police cars, but additional SUVs with tinted windows. Their car swerved onto a side street, the engine roaring as the driver pushed it to its limits. "They were waiting for us," Thomas muttered, his arm protectively across Jamal's back. "This was planned." The second impact was stronger, sending their vehicle skidding sideways. Through the chaos, Jamal heard the distinctive popping sounds of gunfire. The supposedly bulletproof glass began to spiderweb under the impact of specialized ammunition. "Abaixo-se," yelled the driver in Portuguese as he drew a weapon from beneath his seat. Thomas immediately covered Jamal with his body as the first bullets penetrated the passenger compartment. The driver returned fire through a small portal that had opened in his door, but they were outnumbered. Masked men surrounded the vehicle, using specialized tools to force the armored doors. In the chaos, Jamal caught another glimpse of the man with heterochromatic eyes, not masked like the others, watching the assault with cold calculation. It was the same face that had haunted Jamal's nightmares for 3 years, the same expression of determination moments before the crash that killed his parents. Panic surged through Jamal's veins, but with it came a strange clarity. He remembered something Thomas had shown him during their tour of the company, a security feature in the executive vehicles. "The trunk," Jamal whispered urgently to Thomas. "There's an emergency access panel between the seats." Thomas's eyes widened in recognition. With one swift movement, he pushed a concealed button beneath the center armrest. A section of the seat back slid away, revealing a narrow passage into the trunk compartment. "Go," Thomas urged. "There's an emergency communication system back there." Jamal didn't hesitate. He squeezed through the opening, the sounds of the firefight muffled as the panel slid shut behind him. The trunk was cramped, but contained a small terminal with a glowing screen. Jamal activated it with shaking fingers, sending the emergency distress signal, just as Thomas had demonstrated during the company tour. Through the partition, he heard Thomas cry out in pain. The sound sent ice through Jamal's veins. He pressed his ear against the divider, straining to hear what was happening over the continued gunfire and shouting. Minutes that felt like hours crawled by. Suddenly, new sirens pierced the air. Not just police, but what sounded like multiple response vehicles. The gunfire intensified briefly, then abruptly ceased. Voices shouted orders, car doors slammed, engines roared to life and faded into the distance. The partition slid open, revealing not Thomas, but a security officer in tactical gear. "Clear," the man said into his radio. "I've got the boy. He's unharmed." Jamal scrambled out of the trunk, his eyes frantically searching for Thomas. What he saw made his stomach lurch. Thomas slumped against the door, his shirt stained crimson, face ashen with shock and pain. Paramedics were already working on him, cutting away fabric to expose a gunshot wound to his shoulder. "Thomas!" Jamal cried, lunging toward him only to be held back by the security officer. "Let them work, son," the man said firmly. "He's alive, but he needs immediate medical attention." Everything after that became a blur of sirens, flashing lights, and urgent voices. Jamal found himself wrapped in a shock blanket in the back of an ambulance, watching helplessly as Thomas was loaded into another. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was Thomas's hand reaching weakly toward him before falling limply to the stretcher. Hours later, Jamal sat alone in the emergency waiting room, his clothes still stained with Thomas's blood. He'd been questioned briefly by police officers and Reynolds security personnel, but now he waited in silence, his mind replaying the attack in an endless loop. The man with the mismatched eyes, the precise coordination of the ambush, the way the bullets had penetrated supposedly bulletproof glass. These weren't ordinary criminals. They had known exactly who they were targeting and had come prepared with specialized equipment. The sudden appearance of Catherine running through the automatic doors broke his reverie. Her normally perfect hair was disheveled, her face streaked with tears. When she saw Jamal, she rushed to him, enveloping him in a tight embrace. "He's going to survive," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thanks to you." She pulled back, her hands gently framing his face. The doctors said if he hadn't received treatment so quickly. She couldn't finish the sentence. Before they could speak further, two men in suits approached them, their expressions grave. Jamal recognized the deliberate stance and watchful eyes of law enforcement. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'm Detective Morales, and this is Detective Chen," the taller one said, showing his badge. "We need to ask you both some questions about what happened today." Catherine nodded wearily. "Of course, but Jamal has been through enough already. Perhaps we could—" "Actually," Detective Chen interrupted, "we need to speak with both of you." His tone left no room for negotiation. "If you'll follow us, we've arranged a more private area." They were led to a small conference room off the main waiting area. Detective Morales closed the door behind them, while Chen placed a thick folder on the table. "Jamal Washington, is that correct?" Chen asked, though it was clearly a formality. Jamal nodded, suddenly wary of the detective's formal manner. Chen opened the folder, revealing photos of Jamal's biological parents. "We need you to understand something important." He slid a document across the table, an official memorandum with the FBI seal. "Your father didn't work for Thomas Reynolds." Jamal stared at the document, confusion clouding his features. "Eric Washington was our undercover agent," Morales explained, his voice gentler than his partner's. "He was investigating Thomas Reynolds for intellectual property theft and possible involvement with international terrorist groups. We believe Reynolds discovered your father's true identity and arranged the accident." Jamal looked up at Catherine, who appeared as shocked as he felt. Her face had drained of color, her hand trembling as it reached for his across the table. "This means," Detective Chen continued, sliding a surveillance photo showing Thomas with suspicious-looking men, "that you're living with the man who probably ordered your parents killed." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Jamal stared at the surveillance photo, his mind struggling to reconcile the Thomas Reynolds who had protected him with his own body with the man these FBI agents were describing. A man who would order the murder of Jamal's parents. "That's not possible," Catherine whispered, her fingers trembling as they reached for the photo. "There must be some mistake." Detective Chen's expression remained impassive. "Mrs. Reynolds, we understand this is difficult to hear, but we have substantial evidence that your husband has been involved in illegal activities for years. Eric Washington was close to gathering enough proof to bring charges when he was killed." 3 hours later, Jamal found himself sitting in the back of an unmarked sedan, watching the city lights blur through rain-streaked windows. The FBI had moved quickly, transferring him to a safe house before Thomas could be discharged from the hospital. Catherine had been left behind to be questioned further, her tearful protests ignored, as agents escorted Jamal away. "It's for your protection," Agent Diaz explained from the front passenger seat. She was in her mid-30s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Until we understand the full extent of Reynolds' operations, we can't risk him having access to you. The safe house turned out to be an unremarkable suburban home with beige siding and a neatly trimmed lawn. Nothing about it suggested it was an FBI protective location, which was precisely the point. Inside, the furniture was generic but comfortable, the kitchen stocked with basic supplies. It could have been any middle-class family home in America. "Your room is upstairs. First door on the right," Agent Diaz said, setting down a duffel bag containing clothes hastily purchased for him. "There's round-the-clock security. Someone will always be nearby, even if you don't see them." Jamal nodded numbly, too overwhelmed to form words. His entire world had been upended twice in less than a month. First, when the Reynolds took him in, and now with the revelation that Thomas might be responsible for his parents' deaths. "Try to get some sleep," Agent Diaz said, her tone softening slightly. "We'll talk more in the morning." Sleep proved impossible. Jamal lay on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling fan rotating slowly above him. His mind raced through every interaction with Thomas, searching for signs he might have missed. Had there been malice behind those thoughtful gifts? Were the security measures truly for his protection, or to keep him contained? The next morning, Jamal picked at his breakfast while Agent Diaz briefed her colleague at the kitchen table. They spoke in low voices, but occasional phrases drifted his way. Electronic surveillance, witness protection possibilities, Reynolds' legal team already pushing back. "Can I ask a question?" Jamal finally interrupted, setting down his untouched toast. Both agents turned to him with identical expressions of cautious assessment. "Of course," Agent Diaz said. "If Thomas Reynolds killed my parents, why would he adopt me?" The question had been burning in his mind all night. "It doesn't make sense." Agent Wilson, the older of the two, leaned forward. "It's a good question, Jamal. There could be several reasons. Guilt is one possibility. Or maybe you know something you don't realize you know," Agent Diaz added. "Your father might have shared information with you, perhaps in a way that seemed innocuous at the time. A game, a story, a special place." Jamal shook his head. "My dad was careful about his work." Yet even as he said it, memories flickered at the edges of his consciousness. His father teaching him number sequences as they played catch in the backyard, calling them their special code. "There's also the possibility of misdirection," Agent Wilson continued. "Taking in the orphaned son of a man he had killed would certainly help build Thomas Reynolds' image as a benevolent figure." That afternoon, Agent Diaz spread documents across the dining table. Financial transfers, travel records, patent filings. Jamal was surprised they were showing him this information, but Agent Diaz explained that understanding the case might help him remember relevant details. "These are wire transfers from Reynolds Enterprises to offshore accounts," she pointed to one document. "They coincide with trips your father made to Washington, D.C. in the months before his death." Another paper showed patent filings for encryption technology, submitted by Reynolds Enterprises exactly 1 year after the accident. "This bears remarkable similarity to theoretical work your father was doing." The evidence seemed substantial, yet something still felt off to Jamal. "Can I make a phone call?" he asked suddenly. Agent Diaz frowned. "I'm afraid not. For security reasons, we need to limit outside contact." "I need to talk to Marcus," Jamal insisted. "He's my friend from the Glovers. I'm worried about him." "We can check on him for you," Agent Wilson offered, "but direct contact would be too risky right now." Jamal's concern for Marcus gnawed at him through dinner and into the evening. Marcus was still at the Glovers, possibly suffering without Jamal there to deflect some of Mr. Glover's temper. And what if Thomas's enemies decided Marcus was a way to get to Jamal? The FBI seemed focused only on protecting him from Thomas, not considering other threats. That night, lying awake again, Jamal found his thoughts circling back to his father. Eric Washington had been methodical, always planning 3 steps ahead. If he was truly an FBI agent investigating Thomas Reynolds, he would have had contingency plans, ways to protect his family and his work. "Always trust the codes, Jamal," his father had told him once. "People can lie, but codes don't." The memory hit him with unexpected clarity. They had been sitting on the porch swing, eating popsicles on a hot summer day. His father had just taught him a new sequence of numbers, making a game of it. "Remember this one, it's important. Someday you might need it." Jamal sat up in bed, suddenly fully awake. The number sequence his father had drilled into him wasn't just a game, it was insurance. But insurance for what? And how could he use it now, trapped in this safe house? The next morning, Jamal observed the agents more carefully, noting their routines. Agent Diaz left at 8 a.m., replaced by Agent Wilson. At noon, a third agent arrived with lunch and updates. They changed shifts again at 8 p.m., when Agent Diaz returned for the night shift. During dinner, Jamal casually asked questions about Thomas's condition. "Is he still in the hospital?" "He was discharged yesterday," Agent Diaz replied. "He's been making a lot of noise about getting you back, hiring additional lawyers, threatening to go to the media." "Does he know I'm here?" "No. This location is secure." Jamal nodded, filing away the information. Thomas was looking for him. That could mean he was concerned for Jamal's safety, or worried about what Jamal might reveal. That night, Jamal lay fully clothed on top of his bed, listening to the house. "Settle." At 2:30 a.m., he heard Agent Diaz making her hourly check of the perimeter, her footsteps passing his door and continuing down the hallway. He'd noticed this pattern the previous night. She always checked his room last, opening the door slightly to confirm he was asleep. Quickly, Jamal arranged pillows under his blanket to simulate a sleeping body, a trick he'd perfected in foster homes when he needed to avoid late-night confrontations. He positioned them carefully, making sure the shape would appear convincing in the dim light. He waited behind the door, heart pounding, as Agent Diaz completed her rounds. When she opened his door and peered in, he held his breath. She lingered longer than he'd anticipated, and for a moment, he feared she would enter the room fully. Then, apparently satisfied, she closed the door and returned to her post downstairs. Jamal waited another 20 minutes, counting seconds in his head as his father had taught him. Then he moved silently to the window, testing it slowly to minimize noise. The FBI had installed additional locks, but they were designed to keep people out, not in. With careful manipulation, he disengaged them and slid the window open, just enough to squeeze through. The night air was cool against his face as he assessed his options. The roof of the porch extended beneath his window, providing a pathway to the large oak tree at the corner of the house. Its branches reached conveniently close to the roofline, an escape route that experienced climbers like Jamal, who had navigated countless foster homes, would immediately recognize. Moving with deliberate precision, Jamal eased himself onto the porch roof, crawling on his belly to distribute his weight and avoid creaking. He reached the oak tree and descended with practiced efficiency, using the rough bark for handholds. Once on the ground, he stuck to the shadows, remembering how the exterior security cameras were positioned. There was a gap in coverage between the back, garden, and the neighbor's fence, a blind spot he'd noticed during his afternoon reading on the patio. Reaching the fence, he hoisted himself over with minimal noise, dropping into the neighboring yard. From there, he moved through a series of backyards, staying close to hedges and garden sheds, putting distance between himself and the safe house before eventually emerging onto a quiet residential street. No alarms had sounded. No flashlights swept the darkness behind him. Either his absence remained undiscovered, or the agents were giving him a head start for reasons of their own. Jamal had no illusions about how long his freedom would last. By morning, every law enforcement officer in Chicago would be looking for him. He needed to move quickly, to find answers before they found him. With no money and no phone, his options were limited. But he knew where he needed to go. Thomas Reynolds might be guilty of everything the FBI claimed, or he might be innocent. Either way, he held the keys to understanding what had happened to Jamal's parents. And there was only one place Jamal might find proof one way or the other: the Reynolds mansion, where Thomas had returned after his discharge from the hospital. Disappearing into the shadows between the suburban houses, Jamal pulled his brown jacket tighter around his body. He wasn't running away from danger, but running toward it, determined to discover for himself which version of Thomas Reynolds was real: the murderer of his parents, or the man who had risked his own life to protect him. The night wrapped around Jamal like a familiar blanket as he made his way through the suburban streets, using every shadow and alleyway to remain hidden. His years in foster care had taught him how to move unseen, a skill that now might save his life. The Reynolds estate was miles away, but Jamal had memorized the route during their daily commutes to Lakeside Prep. After walking for nearly 2 hours, his legs aching and stomach growling with hunger, Jamal caught sight of the first security camera marking the perimeter of the Reynolds property. He crouched behind a hedge, observing the patterns of the guards patrolling the grounds. The FBI presence was unmistakable. Black sedans parked strategically around the estate, agents in tactical gear making regular sweeps of the area. "They've got the place locked down tight," Jamal whispered to himself, his eyes scanning for weaknesses in the security network. During his brief stay with the Reynolds, he had explored every corner of the estate, discovering service entrances and maintenance pathways that even Catherine seemed unaware of. Moving carefully along the outer wall, Jamal located the blind spot he had discovered during his explorations, a section where 2 security cameras overlapped but left a narrow gap due to an ancient oak tree that disrupted their field of vision. The gap lasted only 3 seconds, but that would be enough. Jamal timed the patrol rounds, counting under his breath just as his father had taught him. When the moment came, he scaled the wall with practiced efficiency, using the oak's sprawling branches to mask his ascent. The bark bit into his palms as he pulled himself over, dropping silently onto the soft mulch of the garden below. Once inside the grounds, Jamal pressed himself against the cool stone of the mansion, listening intently for any sound that might indicate he'd been spotted. The gardens were eerily quiet, the usual ambient noises of the estate subdued by the heavy security presence. Sliding along the wall, he approached the service entrance he had once used to sneak cookies from the kitchen after bedtime. The door was locked, but Jamal remembered the code from watching Thomas input it during their tour of the house. His fingers trembled slightly as he punched in the 6-digit sequence. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the lock disengaged. Inside, the service corridor was dimly lit and empty. Jamal moved swiftly, his footsteps barely audible on the polished floor. He avoided the main hallways where agents might be stationed, instead using the labyrinthine network of service passages that connected the various wings of the mansion. As he approached Thomas's office, Jamal heard voices and froze. 2 FBI agents were conversing just around the corner. "Reynolds isn't talking," one said. "His lawyers have him locked down tight." "What about the evidence from Washington's research?" the other replied. "Inconclusive. We know he was investigating Reynolds, but the final report was never filed." The agents moved on, their footsteps fading down the corridor. Jamal waited until silence returned before continuing to Thomas's office. The door was sealed with evidence tape, a clear indication that the FBI had already searched it. Carefully peeling back the tape in a way that would allow him to replace it later, Jamal slipped inside the darkened office. Moonlight filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across Thomas's imposing desk. The room had been thoroughly searched, drawers left partially open, books askew on shelves, the computer missing entirely. Jamal moved straight to the desk, remembering how Thomas had accessed his computer during their conversation about Eric Washington. There had been a specific sequence of keys, not the standard password entry, but something more complex. Running his fingers along the underside of the desk, Jamal found what he was looking for, a small concealed keypad. His heart racing, he input the sequence his father had taught him years ago, the numbers flowing from muscle memory. 7 to 3, 9, 2, 6, 1, 8, 4 to 5. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft hydraulic hiss, a panel in the wall behind Thomas's desk slid open, revealing a hidden compartment containing a small safe and several external hard drives. Jamal approached cautiously, half expecting an alarm to sound. The safe required another code, and this time Jamal hesitated. Would his father's sequence work again? Deciding to try, he entered the same numbers. The safe remained locked. Frustration welled up inside him. He was so close, yet still cut off from whatever secrets Thomas had hidden away. Closing his eyes, Jamal forced himself to think. His father had always emphasized the importance of patterns, saying that the most secure codes were those that followed logical sequences only the creator would recognize. Opening his eyes, Jamal tried a variation, reversing the sequence. 548162937. The safe clicked open. Inside were documents, USB drives, and a collection of small notebooks filled with his father's handwriting. Jamal's hands trembled as he lifted out the first folder, opening it to find evidence that turned his understanding upside down. There were surveillance photos of Eric Washington meeting with Thomas Reynolds, but they weren't adversarial encounters. They looked like collaborations. Both men bent over technical diagrams, expressions animated with shared excitement. More shocking were the photos showing Eric meeting with another man, Gregory Harding, according to the notation, CEO of Harding Industries, Reynolds' chief competitor. In these images, Eric appeared guarded, his body language tense. A third set of photos revealed something even more unexpected. Catherine Reynolds meeting privately with Harding, their body language suggesting intimacy and familiarity that went beyond business. In one particularly damning image, Catherine was passing what appeared to be a data drive to Harding while in a secluded corner of a restaurant. Digging deeper, Jamal discovered transcripts of recorded conversations. His father had been wearing a wire, but not to catch Thomas, to gather evidence against Harding. According to the transcripts, Harding had been attempting to steal Thomas's encryption technology and sell it to foreign entities, including groups with terrorist connections. Most incriminating of all was a document, on Harding Industries' letterhead, an order for permanent resolution of the Washington security breach, signed by Gregory Harding himself. Attached was a photo of Eric, Lucy, and Jamal Washington, their home address circled in red. He wasn't investigating Thomas, Jamal whispered, the truth dawning on him with terrible clarity. Dad was protecting him from Harding. Further documents revealed that Catherine Reynolds was not Catherine Reynolds at all. She was Catherine Harding, Gregory's sister, who had married Thomas 3 years ago, shortly after Eric Washington began his investigation. Her position gave her access to Reynolds Enterprises' most sensitive information, which she had been feeding to her brother. The sound of footsteps in the hallway jolted Jamal back to his present danger. He quickly photographed key documents with a small camera he'd found in the safe, then carefully returned everything to its original position. As he was about to close the safe, a final item caught his eye, a small envelope with his name written in his father's handwriting. Without hesitation, Jamal pocketed it, then sealed the safe and reactivated the hidden panel. He had just finished replacing the evidence tape on the office door when he heard a soft click behind him. I wondered if you might find your way here. Jamal spun around to find Catherine Reynolds standing in the connecting doorway from the bedroom suite, a small revolver pointed steadily at him. She looked different than he remembered, her usual warm expression replaced by cold calculation, her posture no longer that of an elegant socialite, but of someone trained and dangerous. You shouldn't have come back, she said, her voice carrying none of the maternal concern she had shown him these past weeks. Jamal's mind raced, processing everything he had just learned. "It was you," he said, the pieces falling into place. "You're Gregory Harding's sister." A smile without humor curved Catherine's lips. "Very good. Thomas never suspected his lovely wife. So convenient that you saved my life that day. The perfect opportunity to get close to the files I needed and monitor the investigation Thomas continued after your father's death. The shooting wasn't random," Jamal realized aloud. "Your brother's men staged it." "A necessary performance," Catherine confirmed. "Though I admit I didn't expect a child to play hero. That was an unexpected complication that worked out rather well in the end." From the hallway came a weak voice. "Catherine?" She turned slightly toward the sound, momentarily distracted. In that instant, Jamal lunged for the desk, his fingers finding the hidden button that Thomas had shown him during their first visit to the office, an emergency security protocol. Alarms immediately blared throughout the mansion. Steel shutters descended over the windows and doors, locking down the room. A robotic voice announced, "Security protocol enabled. All conversations now being recorded and transmitted to secure server." Catherine's face contorted with rage as she realized what was happening. She raised the gun, but before she could fire, her own voice filled the room. Recordings of her conversations with her brother, planning the theft of Thomas's technology, and discussing the unfortunate accident that had befallen the Washington family. "You little..." She lunged toward Jamal just as the connecting door burst open. Thomas Reynolds stood there, pale and weakened, supporting himself against the doorframe with one arm in a sling. His eyes widened at the scene before him. Catherine with a gun pointed at Jamal, the security system in full lockdown mode. "Catherine?" he repeated, disbelief and betrayal washing over his features as the recordings continued to play, revealing years of deception. Catherine swung the gun toward her husband, her face twisted with contempt. "It was always going to end this way, Thomas. My brother offered you partnership years ago, but your precious ethics got in the way." Before she could pull the trigger, the office door exploded inward. FBI agents poured into the room, weapons drawn. In the chaos, Jamal dove toward Thomas, knocking him back into the bedroom as Catherine fired wildly. When the agents finally subdued Catherine, they found Jamal shielding Thomas with his own body, the wounded man looking at the boy with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow that needed no words. As the FBI secured Catherine and agents swarmed the room, one of them activated his radio. "Subject in custody. System recording everything. Send forensics team to secure digital evidence." Through the broken office door, Jamal could hear Catherine's voice rising above the commotion, her final threat carrying clearly. "You really think my brother doesn't have a plan B? This is far from over." "You really think my brother doesn't have a plan B? This is far from over." Catherine's words hung in the air like a toxic cloud as agents secured her wrists with handcuffs. Her eyes, once warm and maternal when looking at Jamal, now burned with icy hatred. Thomas slumped against the doorframe, the strain of his gunshot wound evident in his ashen face. "Jamal," he whispered, "are you hurt?" Jamal shook his head, unable to form words as the reality of what had just transpired washed over him. Catherine, the woman who had welcomed him into her home, who had held him when he cried, had been plotting against them all along. She had been part of the conspiracy that killed his parents. Special Agent Morales approached them, holstering his weapon. "Mr. Reynolds, we need to get you back to bed. You shouldn't be up in your condition." Two agents gently helped Thomas back to his bedroom, while Morales turned to Jamal. "You've got some explaining to do, young man. You were supposed to be in protective custody." "You told me Thomas killed my parents," Jamal replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "But you were wrong. It was Gregory Harding, and Catherine was helping him." Morales frowned, glancing toward the office where agents were already collecting evidence from the hidden compartment. We're going to need to review everything you found. This changes the entire investigation. In Thomas's bedroom, medical personnel had arrived to check his wound. Jamal hovered anxiously in the doorway until Thomas motioned him closer. "You came back," Thomas said weakly, "even after they told you I killed your parents." Jamal nodded, perching carefully on the edge of the bed. "Something didn't add up. Why would you adopt me if you wanted my family dead? And there were things my dad taught me, codes, patterns, that led me back here." Thomas attempted a smile that turned into a grimace of pain. "Your father was brilliant. The encryption system we developed together would have revolutionized cybersecurity. Harding wanted it, badly enough to kill for it." A forensic technician appeared at the door. "Sir, we've recovered audio files from the security system. You'll want to hear this." He set up a laptop on the bedside table and played a recording of Catherine speaking to someone on the phone. "The boy was a stroke of luck," Catherine's voice said. "He actually saved me during the stage shooting. Thomas was so impressed he's adopted him. I now have the perfect cover to access everything. The fact that he's Eric Washington's son makes it even more delicious. Poetic justice, don't you think, Gregory?" Thomas closed his eyes, pain of a different sort washing over his features. 3 years, he murmured. 3 years of marriage, and I never suspected. Agent Morales dismissed the technician and sat in the chair beside the bed. "Mr. Reynolds, we owe you an apology. We misinterpreted the evidence. We thought Washington was investigating you, when in fact you were working together to expose Harding." "Eric was more than my employee," Thomas said softly. "He was my friend. When Catherine suggested adopting Jamal after the shooting, I thought it was fate giving me a chance to make amends for failing to protect his family." He turned to Jamal, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have told you the truth from the beginning." In the days that followed, the Reynolds mansion became the center of an expanding investigation. Gregory Harding had disappeared, his private jet having departed for the Cayman Islands hours before Catherine's arrest. International law enforcement agencies were alerted, but with Harding's resources and connections, agents were not optimistic about a quick capture. Jamal, now free from suspicion but still under protection, stayed close to Thomas as he recovered. The bond between them, tested by deception and violence, began to strengthen as the full truth emerged. One afternoon, as Thomas reviewed case files from his bed, Jamal finally opened the envelope he had found in the safe, the one addressed to him in his father's handwriting. Inside was a simple note. "Jamal, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. Trust Thomas Reynolds. The work we're doing will save lives, but powerful people want to stop us. Remember our codes. They're the key to everything. I love you, son. Dad." Tears blurred Jamal's vision as he handed the note to Thomas. "He knew he was in danger," Jamal said softly. "He was trying to protect me." Thomas read the note carefully before returning it. "Your father suspected someone inside Reynolds Enterprises was feeding information to Harding. He didn't know it was Catherine." He sighed heavily. "If I had been more vigilant, maybe your parents would still be alive." A knock at the door interrupted them. Agent Diaz entered, her expression grim. "We've got a problem. Gregory Harding was spotted in Chicago 2 hours ago, and we have reason to believe he's coming here." Thomas immediately tried to sit up straighter, wincing with the effort. "Increase security around the perimeter. Move Jamal to a secure location." "No," Jamal interrupted firmly. "I'm staying with you." The determination in his young face brooked no argument. "We're stronger together. That's what my dad's note meant. Harding wants us separated because together we can stop him." Agent Diaz looked unconvinced. "It's too dangerous." "He's right," Thomas said, surprising both of them. "Harding knows I have access to the complete encryption system, but only if I can access the secondary server at the office. He's hoping to eliminate both of us before we can secure the evidence against him." Agent Diaz considered this, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll arrange for additional security, but we should move both of you to a different location. This mansion is too large to secure effectively." As preparations began for their relocation, Jamal suddenly remembered something that had been overshadowed by recent events. "What about Marcus?" he asked Thomas. "He's still with the Glovers. If Harding knows about me, he might go after Marcus to get to me." Thomas immediately reached for his phone. "You're right. I'll have my legal team locate him and arrange protective custody." He dialed a number, speaking rapidly to his attorney about emergency measures to locate and possibly obtain temporary guardianship of Marcus as well. While Thomas made arrangements, Agent Diaz received an urgent call. Her expression darkened as she listened. "When?" she asked sharply. "How many?" After another moment, she ended the call and turned to them. "Harding escaped federal custody during transport, and we've got surveillance footage of suspicious individuals watching the mansion." Thomas ended his own call, his face grave. "We need to leave immediately. My security team has a protocol for this. There's a safe house that even Catherine doesn't know about." Within minutes, security personnel were helping Thomas into a wheelchair, while others gathered essential items. Jamal stayed close, his backpack now containing the precious note from his father and a few belongings. As they headed for the garage via a service elevator, Jamal caught Thomas's arm. "We need to get Marcus first," he insisted. "The Glovers won't protect him. If anything, they might sell him out if Harding offers money." Thomas hesitated, clearly torn between immediate safety and Jamal's concern for his friend. "It's extremely dangerous," he said finally. "Harding will be watching for any movement from this house." "Please," Jamal urged. "I can't leave him behind again. Not when he might be in danger because of me." The conviction in Jamal's voice swayed Thomas. "All right," he conceded, turning to the head of his security team. "Change of plans, Dawson. We need to make a stop in Southside first." Agent Diaz looked alarmed. "Mr. Reynolds, that's not advisable." "It's necessary," Thomas cut her off firmly. "This boy risked his life to save my wife, then again to save me, despite believing I might have killed his parents. If his friend is in danger, we're going to help." The security team quickly adjusted their route, choosing a roundabout path to avoid potential surveillance. As they left the mansion through a little-used maintenance exit, Jamal found himself once again in an armored vehicle, this time heading back to the neighborhood he had so recently escaped. The familiar streets of South Side Chicago looked different through the tinted windows of the armored SUV. Buildings he had passed 1,000 times now seemed ominous, potential hiding places for Harding's men. Thomas, still pale but alert, studied a tablet showing real-time surveillance of the area around the Glovers' home. "We'll park a block away," Dawson explained. "Direct approach is too risky. We've got men establishing a perimeter, but we need to move fast." As they approached the neighborhood, Jamal felt a growing sense of dread. Through binoculars borrowed from one of the security team, he scanned the area around the Glovers' dilapidated house. What he saw made his blood run cold. "Those men," he whispered, pointing to two figures loitering near a convenience store across from the foster home. "They were part of the group that attacked our car." Through the binoculars, the heart of Jamal froze as he recognized two of the men who had attacked Thomas's car, now positioned near the Glovers' house. Somehow, Harding had arrived before them, and Marcus was in immediate danger. Jamal's heart pounded in his chest as he lowered the binoculars, his hands trembling slightly. "They're already here," he whispered, turning to Thomas. "Those men watching the house? They're Harding's people." Thomas leaned forward painfully, his face grim as he examined the scene through the tinted windows. "How many do you see?" "At least 2 by the convenience store," Jamal replied, scanning the area again. "But there could be more hidden." They always work in teams. Dawson, the head of security, was already coordinating with his team through his earpiece. We have confirmed hostiles in the target area. Team 2, maintain perimeter surveillance. Team 3, prepare for extraction. He turned to Thomas. Sir, with all due respect, we should abort. This situation is too volatile. Thomas shook his head firmly. Not an option. That boy in there could be targeted because of his connection to Jamal. We don't leave him behind. Agent Diaz, who had insisted on accompanying them despite her agency's reservations, checked her weapon. I've called for FBI backup, but they're at least 15 minutes out. We need to develop a plan now. Jamal had been studying the house, his mind racing through possibilities. The foster home's layout was burned into his memory. Every creaking floorboard, every loose window, every hiding spot. He had survived there by knowing all the escape routes. I know a way in that they won't be watching, he said suddenly. The Glovers never fixed the basement window on the east side. It's hidden behind the garbage cans. Marcus and I used it whenever we needed to get out without them knowing. Thomas and Agent Diaz exchanged glances. It's too dangerous for you to go in alone, Thomas began. I'm the only one who knows where Marcus might be hiding, Jamal countered. And I can move through that house silently. None of you can. He looked directly at Thomas. You told me once that I was extraordinary. Let me prove it. After a tense debate, a compromise was reached. Jamal would enter the house through the basement window while Dawson's team created a distraction on the opposite side of the block. Agent Diaz would cover the rear exit, and 2 security personnel would position themselves to provide immediate backup. Take this, Thomas said, handing Jamal a small communication device. It's a direct line to all of us. The moment you find Marcus, you tell us, and you both get out immediately. Jamal nodded, tucking the device into his ear. As final preparations were made, he caught Thomas looking at him with an expression that reminded him of his father, a mixture of pride and fear that came from caring too much. Be careful, Thomas said simply. Always am, Jamal replied with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. 20 minutes later, as the security team initiated their distraction, a minor traffic incident 3 blocks away that drew the attention of Harding's watchman, Jamal slipped through backyards and narrow passages toward the Glovers' house. The familiarity of the route brought back memories of countless escapes, times when he and Marcus had fled Mr. Glover's drunken rages or simply needed to breathe free air for a while. Reaching the garbage cans that concealed the basement window, Jamal paused, listening intently. The house seemed quiet, too quiet for the normally chaotic foster home. Carefully, he moved the largest can aside and found the window with its broken lock, just as he remembered. The opening was tight, even for his slender frame, but he managed to squeeze through, landing softly on the damp concrete floor of the basement. The musty darkness enveloped him, filled with the familiar smells of mildew and neglect. Jamal stood motionless, allowing his eyes to adjust while straining to hear any movement above. The floorboards creaked faintly. Someone was moving around upstairs, but the footsteps were too heavy to be Marcus. I'm in, Jamal whispered into his communicator, moving to find Marcus now. He navigated through the cluttered basement, past broken furniture and boxes of forgotten possessions from former foster children. Marcus's favorite hiding spot was behind the old water heater, where a small alcove formed a perfect refuge invisible from the stairs. Marcus, Jamal called softly as he approached the spot. It's me, Jamal. For a heartbeat, there was no response. Then, like a shadow detaching itself from the darkness, Marcus emerged, his thin face a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. Jamal, he whispered back, his voice cracking. Is it really you? Before Jamal could respond, Marcus flung himself forward, clutching Jamal in a tight embrace. They came looking for you, he rushed to explain, his words tumbling out in a panic. Men with guns asking questions. The Glovers told them everything about you for money. I heard Mr. Glover say they're coming back tonight." "I know," Jamal said, keeping his voice low. "That's why I'm here. We're getting you out." Marcus pulled back, noticing for the first time the communication device in Jamal's ear. "We?" "Thomas Reynolds and his security team. They're outside right now." Jamal quickly explained the situation, watching as Marcus processed the incredible turn of events. "You came back for me," Marcus said, the simple statement laden with emotion. "Always," Jamal replied, gripping his friend's shoulder. "Now, we need to move. Those men outside work for the people who killed my parents. They're dangerous, and they might use you to get to me." He activated his communicator again. "I've found Marcus. We're coming out the same way I came in." "Negative," Dawson's voice came back. "Immediately." "We have movement at the front of the house. 2 more hostiles just arrived. Stay put until we clear a path." Jamal relayed this to Marcus, whose eyes widened with fear. "What do we do now?" Before Jamal could answer, heavy footsteps sounded on the basement stairs. Both boys froze, instinctively pressing themselves deeper into the alcove behind the water heater. A beam of light swept across the basement as someone descended the stairs. "Check everywhere," a gruff voice ordered. "The Glover woman said the Washington kid had a friend he was close to. Find the friend. We find Washington." Jamal and Marcus exchanged terrified glances. The men were looking specifically for Marcus as bait to lure Jamal. The irony that Jamal was already in the house wasn't lost on him, but there was no time for reflection. They needed to act. Reaching into his pocket, Jamal pulled out a small pocket knife Thomas had given him. Not a weapon, but perhaps a tool. He scanned the basement, mind racing through possibilities. "There's a crawl space that leads to the yard," Marcus whispered, so faintly Jamal barely heard him. "Behind those boxes. Mr. Glover doesn't know about it. Only the kids do." Jamal nodded, formulating a plan. The men were methodically searching the basement, moving boxes and shining flashlights into corners. There were at least 2 of them, possibly more upstairs. "I'm going to create a distraction," Jamal whispered. "When I do, you crawl through that space and run to the blue van parked 1 block east. Thomas's people will be waiting." Marcus shook his head frantically. "I'm not leaving you." "You have to," Jamal insisted. "I'll be right behind you." The flashlight beam was getting closer to their hiding spot. Making a split-second decision, Jamal used the knife to cut through an exposed electrical cord, running along the floor to a set of basement lights. The resulting short circuit plunged the basement into darkness, accompanied by startled shouts from the men. "Now!" Jamal hissed, pushing Marcus toward the crawl space while activating his communicator. "Marcus is coming out through a crawl space on the east side of the house. Be ready." In the confusion, Jamal grabbed a broken chair leg from a nearby pile of junk and hurled it across the basement, where it crashed into a stack of paint cans. As expected, both men rushed toward the sound, giving Marcus precious seconds to squeeze through the narrow opening. Jamal waited until he was sure Marcus had made it out before attempting to follow. He had just reached the crawl space when a powerful hand grabbed his ankle, yanking him backward. "Got one," a voice shouted triumphantly. "It's the Washington kid." Jamal kicked desperately, his free foot connecting with something solid. The grip on his ankle loosened just enough for him to scramble forward, but not before the man recovered and grabbed his jacket. "Thomas!" Jamal shouted into his communicator. "East side now!" The basement erupted in chaos as Dawson's security team breached the house from multiple entry points. Flashlights and laser sights crisscrossed the darkness, accompanied by authoritative shouts commanding everyone to freeze. In the confusion, Jamal broke free, diving through the crawl space and emerging into the yard just as Agent Diaz rushed forward to cover him. "Marcus," he gasped. "Safe in the vehicle," she confirmed, guiding him in a crouched run toward the street where the armored SUV waited. Inside the vehicle, Jamal found Marcus huddled on the seat next to Thomas, who looked relieved but tense as he monitored the operation through Dawson's body camera feed. "Are you hurt?" Thomas asked as Jamal collapsed into the seat. Jamal shook his head, reaching for Marcus's hand. "We made it. We're okay." The momentary relief was shattered by Dawson's urgent voice over the communication system. "Sir, we have a problem. Harding is here. He just arrived in a black Escalade. He's got at least 4 armed men with him." Thomas's face hardened. "Get back to the vehicles immediately. We're extracting now." The security team executed a swift retreat, but as they piled into their vehicles, a new complication arose. One of Harding's men had positioned himself between their SUV and the exit route, effectively blocking their escape. "We need to create another path," Dawson advised from the second vehicle. "Sir, I recommend we split up. My team will draw their attention while you take the boys to the safe house." Thomas agreed reluctantly, and the driver executed a sharp turn down an alley, taking an alternate route away from the Glover's house. As they sped through the darkened streets of Southside Chicago, Jamal looked back through the rear window, watching as Dawson's vehicle headed in the opposite direction, drawing several of Harding's cars with it. "Will they be okay?" he asked Thomas. "Dawson knows what he's doing," Thomas assured him, though the worry in his eyes betrayed his own concern. "Right now, our priority is getting you boys to safety." Through the binoculars, the heart of Jamal froze as he recognized 2 of the men who had attacked Thomas's car, now positioned near the Glover's house. Somehow, Harding had arrived before them, and Marcus was in immediate danger. The armored SUV raced through the back streets of Southside Chicago, its reinforced tires gripping the worn asphalt as Thomas quickly assessed their options. Jamal and Marcus sat huddled together in the back seat, their young faces tense with fear but determined. "We need a plan," Thomas said, his voice steady despite the pain evident in his eyes. "Harding's men have surely called in our location by now." Agent Diaz checked her weapon before responding. "The safe house is still our best option, but we can't go directly there. We need to make sure we're not followed." Jamal looked between them, his mind racing. Every moment they delayed was another moment Harding's men could surround them. The fact that Harding himself had appeared at the Glover's house showed how serious the situation had become. "I know this neighborhood better than anyone," Jamal said suddenly. "There are ways to move through here that won't show up on any map." Thomas turned to him, eyebrows raised. "What do you have in mind?" Jamal leaned forward, pointing toward an upcoming intersection. "Take the next right, then immediately left into the alley behind Ruiz's grocery. There's a network of connected backyards and service paths that delivery workers use. We can cut through to 47th Street without using main roads." The driver glanced at Thomas, who nodded his approval. "Do it." As they navigated through the narrow passages Jamal indicated, he continued devising their route. "Marcus and I use these paths all the time to avoid Mr. Glover when he was drinking," he explained. "Most of these buildings connect through basements or have fences with loose boards we can slip through." Marcus nodded in confirmation. "The police never patrol these areas. Too tight for their cars." Thomas studied Jamal with newfound respect. The boy's intimate knowledge of the urban landscape might just save their lives. "Can you get us to Bronzeville from here? I have connections there who could help us." "Definitely," Jamal affirmed. "But we'll need to ditch the SUV soon. It's too recognizable and too big for some of these passages." Agent Diaz received an update through her earpiece, her expression darkening. "FBI reports Harding has at least 3 teams converging on this area. They've set up checkpoints on all major roads leading out." The gravity of their situation was clear. They were effectively trapped in a shrinking perimeter, with Harding's forces closing in from all sides. The FBI backup was still minutes away, possibly longer if they encountered Harding's roadblocks. Thomas winced as he shifted in his seat, his wounded shoulder clearly causing him pain. "I have an idea, but it's risky. Driver, Take us to St. Mary's, church on 46th. When they arrived at the small brick church with its modest steeple, Thomas instructed everyone to wait while he limped inside alone. 5 tense minutes later, he emerged with an older man in priest's clothing. "Father Martinez will help us," Thomas explained as he returned to the vehicle. "There's a daycare center connected to the church with a delivery entrance that leads to a different street. He's given us keys to a parish van we can use." The priest approached the window, his weathered face solemn. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, Mr. Reynolds. When you funded our after-school program last year, I never imagined I'd be helping you escape dangerous men." He handed Thomas a set of keys. "The van is old but reliable. God be with you." They transferred quickly to the nondescript white van with the church's logo painted on its side. It offered far less protection than the armored SUV, but the disguise might be their best chance at slipping through Harding's net. "We need to get Marcus somewhere safe first," Jamal insisted as they pulled away from the church. "He's only in danger because of me." Thomas shook his head firmly. "Separating is exactly what Harding wants. We stay together until we reach the safe house." He turned to look Jamal directly in the eyes. "I promise you, I won't let anything happen to either of you." The sincerity in Thomas's voice gave Jamal pause. Despite everything they'd been through, Thomas had consistently put Jamal's safety above his own, even extending that protection to Marcus, a boy he'd never met before today. As they drove cautiously through residential streets, Jamal guided them through a complex route of turns and detours designed to reveal any tale. Agent Diaz kept in contact with her FBI colleagues, receiving updates on Harding's movements. "They found the church," she reported grimly about 20 minutes into their journey. "They're expanding the search radius." Thomas nodded calmly, though the tension in his jaw betrayed his concern. "We're almost to Michigan Avenue. Once we cross, we'll be closer to downtown, where we can disappear in the traffic." Suddenly, Marcus grabbed Jamal's arm, pointing out the window. "Look, isn't that one of them?" A black sedan was parked at the upcoming intersection, a man in a dark suit leaning against the hood, apparently speaking into a radio. He looked up as their van approached, his eyes narrowing with suspicious recognition. "He's seen us," Agent Diaz warned, reaching for her weapon. "Driver, alternate route." The van swerved abruptly down a side street as the man rushed to his vehicle. Jamal could see him speaking urgently into his radio. Their cover was blown. "There's an abandoned warehouse 2 blocks from here," Jamal said quickly. "It has multiple exits and connects to the river. We used to explore it when we were supposed to be in school." The driver accelerated through the narrow streets, the black sedan now visible in their rearview mirror. As they approached the warehouse, another vehicle appeared ahead, blocking their path. "Hold on!" the driver shouted, swerving into an adjacent lot and crashing through a chain-link fence. The van bounced violently over uneven ground before skidding to a stop behind the massive warehouse. "Everyone out," Agent Diaz commanded. "Move quickly, but stay together." They abandoned the vehicle, Thomas grimacing in pain as he hurried alongside them. Jamal led the way to a rusted side door, using a technique he and Marcus had perfected to force the lock. Inside, the cavernous space was filled with shadows and forgotten machinery, dust particles dancing in the few beams of light that penetrated the grimy windows. "This way," Jamal whispered, guiding them toward the back of the building. "There's a loading dock that leads to a service tunnel. It comes out near the water." Behind them, they could hear car doors slamming and men shouting orders. Harding's team had found the van and would be entering the warehouse any minute. "I'll stay back and slow them down," Agent Diaz decided, positioning herself behind a large piece of equipment. "Get the boys out of here." "That wasn't the plan," Thomas objected. "Plans change," she replied firmly. "Go. My backup will be here soon." Reluctantly, Thomas followed Jamal and Marcus deeper into the warehouse. They had just reached the loading dock when the sound of the side door being forced open echoed through the building, followed by the methodical movement of Harding's men, spreading out to search. Jamal pulled aside a section of rotted floorboards, revealing a narrow passage below. "Down here," he whispered. "It's tight, but it leads to the tunnel." Marcus went first, then Thomas, who could barely fit through the opening with his injured shoulder. Jamal was about to follow when gunfire erupted from the front of the warehouse. Agent Diaz was engaging the intruders, buying them precious time. The tunnel was damp and smelled of mildew, forcing them to crouch as they moved forward in near-total darkness. Thomas had activated the flashlight on his phone, casting eerie shadows on the concrete walls. "The exit should be about 50 yards ahead," Jamal informed them, trying to ignore the continued sounds of gunfire echoing faintly behind them. They had almost reached the end when light suddenly flooded the tunnel from ahead. A figure stood silhouetted in the exit, blocking their escape. "Well, well," came a smooth, cultured voice that sent chills down Jamal's spine. The great Thomas Reynolds, reduced to crawling through sewers with children. How the mighty have fallen. Gregory Harding stepped into view, his expensive suit incongruous in the filthy tunnel. Behind him stood 2 armed men, their weapons trained steadily on the group. "It's over, Thomas," Harding continued, his tone almost conversational. "You've led me on quite a chase, but it ends here." Thomas pushed the boys behind him, shielding them with his body despite his injury. "This isn't about them, Gregory. Let the boys go. Your quarrel is with me." Harding laughed, the sound echoing unnaturally in the confined space. "On the contrary, young Mr. Washington here is very much part of this equation. He's the last loose end from his father's unfortunate accident." His eyes settled on Jamal, a cold smile forming on his lips. "Though I must admit, finding you with Reynolds has saved me considerable trouble. 2 birds, 1 stone, as they say." He gestured to one of his men who stepped forward and roughly grabbed Marcus, dragging him away from Jamal and Thomas. "No!" Jamal lunged forward, but was restrained by Thomas. Harding held up his hand, revealing a pistol now pointed directly at them. "A choice presents itself, Thomas. Either you transfer all rights to Washington's encryption technology to me right now, or the boy's friend here will suffer the consequences." Marcus struggled in the man's grip, terror evident in his eyes but determination in his stance. Jamal could only watch helplessly as his best friend was used as leverage against them. "It's a poetic choice, isn't it, Thomas?" Harding called out over the chaos, pressing the gun against Marcus's temple as he backed away. "Either you lose your life's work, or this boy loses his best friend. Exactly as I lost my sister because of you." Time seemed to freeze in the damp tunnel as Harding's ultimatum hung in the air. The gun pressed against Marcus's temple, the boy's eyes wide with terror, yet somehow still trusting that Jamal would find a way to save him. Thomas stood protectively in front of Jamal, his wounded shoulder making his stance unsteady, but his resolve unshaken. "Let him go, Harding," Thomas said, his voice steady despite the dire circumstances. "He's innocent in all this." Harding's cold laugh echoed off the concrete walls. "Innocence is irrelevant. Business is business." He pressed the gun harder against Marcus's head. "The encryption technology or the boy? Choose now." Jamal's mind raced. In the 3 seconds of terrible silence that followed, a lifetime of his father's lessons flashed through his memory. The codes, the patterns, the silent communication system he and Marcus had developed during their time together at the Glovers. A plan formed in his mind with crystalline clarity. "Wait!" Jamal called out, stepping beside Thomas despite the older man's attempt to keep him back. "I know where my father hid the complete encryption key." Harding's eyes narrowed with suspicion. And why would Eric Washington tell his 12-year-old son about classified technology? "Because he knew someone might come after it," Jamal replied, his voice stronger than he felt. His eyes locked with Marcus's, communicating silently in the way they had perfected over years of surviving together. A slight widening of his eyes, a subtle tilt of his head. signals invisible to others but clear as shouted instructions to Marcus. Thomas glanced down at Jamal, momentarily confused before understanding dawned in his eyes. He played along. The boy's telling the truth. Eric created a backup only his son could access. Harding studied them, calculation evident in his cold gaze. "Where is it?" "I need to show you," Jamal insisted. "It's not something I can just explain." The distraction was working. Marcus had recognized Jamal's signals and was subtly shifting his weight, preparing for what was coming. Harding's attention had fixed on Jamal, the prospect of obtaining the encryption technology too tempting to ignore. "Very well," Harding decided, motioning to his men. "Both of you, step forward slowly." As Jamal moved forward, he made a seemingly innocent gesture, running his hand through his hair, 3 quick movements that to Marcus meant, "Count to 3, then drop." Thomas noticed and tensely prepared himself, years of business negotiations having taught him to read subtle cues. "The technology is encoded in a pattern," Jamal explained, continuing to move steadily forward, drawing Harding's complete attention. "My father taught me how to recognize it." 1, Jamal counted silently, taking another step. "Fascinating," Harding replied, his grip on the gun loosening slightly as his interest in the technology overcame his caution. "Your father was always cleverer than I gave him credit for." 2, Jamal continued his silent count, now close enough to see the mismatched eyes that had haunted his nightmares. "Show me now," Harding demanded, his patience wearing thin. 3. The tunnel erupted into chaos. Marcus dropped like a stone, pulling away from his captor's grip as Jamal lunged forward, not at Harding but at the armed guard beside him. The unexpected direction of his attack created a critical moment of confusion. Thomas seized the opportunity, tackling the second guard despite his injured shoulder. The sound of approaching footsteps thundered from both ends of the tunnel. FBI reinforcements had finally arrived. Harding, momentarily startled by the coordinated attack, recovered quickly and aimed his weapon at Thomas. In that fraction of a second, Jamal made a choice that would define the rest of his life. He abandoned his struggle with the guard and threw himself toward Harding, colliding with the man's arm just as the gun discharged. The bullet ricocheted off the concrete wall, missing Thomas by inches. The tunnel filled with shouts and the pounding of boots as FBI agents swarmed in from both entrances. Harding, realizing he was trapped, grabbed for Marcus, who was scrambling away on the ground. His fingers closed around the boy's ankle, using him as a human shield. "Stay back," Harding shouted to the advancing agents. "I'll kill him." Thomas, bleeding freshly from his reopened wound, had managed to subdue the guard he'd tackled. Through the chaos, his eyes met Jamal's, a silent communication passing between them. With a barely perceptible nod, Thomas created another distraction, groaning dramatically and collapsing to his knees, drawing Harding's attention just long enough for Jamal to act. Moving with the quick precision that had saved him countless times in foster care, Jamal grabbed a discarded flashlight and hurled it at the tunnel ceiling. The impact shattered the ancient light fixture above Harding, showering him with glass and momentarily blinding him. Marcus, seizing the opportunity, bit down hard on Harding's hand and broke free as FBI agents rushed forward to apprehend the disgraced CEO. "Are you okay?" Jamal gasped, reaching Marcus first and pulling him into a protective embrace. "Yeah," Marcus nodded, trembling but unharmed. "Nice plan." Thomas staggered toward them, clutching his bleeding shoulder but smiling with relief. "You two are quite the team," he managed, before an FBI medic intercepted him, insisting he sit down for treatment. As agents secured Harding and his men, Jamal and Marcus huddled together against the tunnel wall, watching the scene unfold with exhausted disbelief. Agent Diaz appeared, disheveled but triumphant, having successfully held off Harding's men in the warehouse. "You boys all right?" she asked, crouching before them. They nodded in unison, the synchronized movement a testament to their bond. "That was some quick thinking back there," she commented, glancing at Jamal with newfound respect. "Using a code to communicate with your friend." "My dad always said codes were the most powerful, when only the right people could understand them," Jamal replied softly. 6 months later, Jamal adjusted his tie nervously as he and Marcus waited outside the judge's chambers. The courthouse corridor was quiet, sunlight streaming through tall windows onto polished marble floors. Thomas stood nearby, speaking softly with his attorneys, his wounded shoulder healed, but his posture still favoring his right side slightly. The past months had been a whirlwind of depositions, security briefings, and careful rebuilding of trust. Harding was awaiting trial, his criminal empire dismantled piece by piece as authorities unraveled the extent of his operations. Catherine had turned state's evidence against her brother in exchange for a reduced sentence, her testimony proving invaluable to prosecutors. "Do you think it will actually happen today?" Marcus whispered, fidgeting with his new suit jacket. "Thomas says it will," Jamal replied, glancing toward the man who had become so much more than a guardian to him. "His lawyers are the best." The doors to the judge's chambers opened, and a clerk appeared. "The judge will see you now." Inside, Judge Harriet Monroe, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes, reviewed the final paperwork as they all took their seats. She looked up, studying first Thomas, then the two boys who sat nervously side by side. "I've reviewed all the documents in this case thoroughly," she began. "This has been quite an extraordinary journey for all of you." She turned her attention directly to Jamal and Marcus. "Boys, I want to make sure you both understand what's happening today. This is a permanent decision." "We understand, Your Honor," Jamal replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. Marcus nodded in agreement beside him. Judge Monroe smiled slightly. "Very well, then." She picked up her pen and signed the documents with a flourish. "By the power vested in me by the state of Illinois, I hereby approve the adoption of Jamal Washington and Marcus Taylor by Thomas Reynolds." The sound of her gavel echoed through the chambers. "Congratulations to all of you. You are now, legally, a family." Thomas's eyes shone with unshed tears as he embraced both boys. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, alerted to the high-profile adoption. Thomas's security team kept them at a respectful distance, as a court official explained to the gathered press the significance of the day's proceedings. "Mr. Washington's work has finally been recognized for what it was," the official announced. "A groundbreaking encryption system that has already prevented 3 major cyber attacks on national infrastructure. His posthumous commendation from the FBI director acknowledges his sacrifice in service to his country." As they prepared to leave, a man in a nondescript suit approached Jamal, handing him an envelope before melting back into the crowd. Inside, Jamal found the missing photograph of his parents that had disappeared from his backpack months ago, along with a handwritten note. "Your father saved many lives. Now you've followed in his footsteps. He would be proud." It was signed simply, Director, FBI. 2 years later, Jamal adjusted his graduation cap as he waited for his name to be called at Phillips Exeter Academy's commencement ceremony. At 17, he had completed his studies in record time, specializing in computer science and cybersecurity. In the audience, Thomas and Marcus cheered loudly as the headmaster announced Jamal's acceptance to MIT with a full scholarship. Afterward, as they gathered for photos, Thomas leaned toward Marcus and whispered, "I think I'll need to expand the lab at home if we want to keep up with him." Marcus, now 15 and developing his own talent for mechanics, grinned. "He's always been good at protecting people," he replied, watching as Jamal politely answered a journalist's questions. "How do you feel about having such a bright future after such a tumultuous past?" the reporter asked Jamal. Jamal adjusted his brown jacket, the same one he'd worn the day he protected Catherine, now kept as a reminder, and answered with a smile. Let's just say I've learned that family isn't who gives you a roof, but who gives you a shield when the bullets start flying.